What's up guys, James here, how you doing? So this video is going to be about the determinism and free will debate. I know this topic's pretty much dead and buried, but I've been giving this a lot of thought recently and I think I've got quite a few things I can say about it. The reason I didn't really make a video about this before is because although it's fun to think about, I don't have a strong belief on determinism one way or the other. And really, I don't think it makes any difference, because even if we are in a deterministic universe, it's still too complicated for us to actually make any predictions based upon that. Because in order to simulate what's going to happen in the universe, you need a computer bigger than the universe in order to do that. Now, I think that this argument is a lot more complicated than a lot of people give it credit for. So, to quickly sum up what determinism actually states, determinism is a philosophy stating that for everything that happens, there are conditions such that, given those conditions, nothing else could happen. Different versions of this theory depend upon various alleged connections and interdependencies of things and events, asserting that these hold without exception. So the logical consequence of this is that if you could reverse time all the way back to the Big Bang, and then wait nearly 14 billion years, every single atom would be exactly where it is now, and every single decision anyone ever made would be exactly the same, because there would be no randomness. And if you've got no randomness on the atomic level of a system, the smallest subunit of a system, none whatsoever, then the system as a whole will always end up exactly the same, no matter how many times you run the experiment. Now, free will and determinism also aren't mutually exclusive. So you can put a chart with free will along one axis and determinism along the other axis. I'll snap up that chart now. This comes from the Wikipedia article about determinism. So you've got hard determinism, which is no free will and determinism. You've then got indeterminism, which is no free will and no determinism. You've got compatibilism, which is free will and determinism work together, but I haven't really looked that far into that yet. I probably should, because it would be quite interesting to have a look at. I think I'd quite strongly disagree with that one personally. And then you've got libertarianism, which is an indeterministic free will universe. It's also worth drawing a distinction between determinism and fatalism. Fatalism deals with fate. There is a variety within that ideology, but it basically argues that inevitability means that human endeavour cannot override fate. Let's use an analogy for the difference between fatalism and determinism then. So let's look at time-travelling films. Back to the Future is a perfect analogy for a deterministic world. If you go back in time and you don't interfere, the universe will end up exactly the same when you get back, because all of the choices anyone made would be exactly the same, and all of that stuff because you didn't change anything, and causality can only happen in one set way. However, if you do go back and change things, then you're also changing what causality events can happen, so the universe would actually end up different, even though that's deterministic. In a fatalistic universe, however, if you time travel, somehow by changing something, your interference would actually end up causing the event you're trying to prevent from happening anyway, or somehow some magic force would end up just somehow making the event happen. Another analogy could be having a river. So determinism, you've got a long river, water will run from point A to point B. Now supposing you've got a split at the end, so it can go either point A or point B. If you block one way, it can go either to point B or point C. If you block point B, then the water will run to point C, and vice versa. I suppose fatalism wouldn't be a split, it would be a big rock in the middle of the river, and the rock can push the water to one side or the other, but it ends up coming out at the same place anyway. So, as I said before, I'm agnostic about determinism, but fatalism is clearly bullshit. Free will, on the other hand, is a different matter to determinism. I don't believe that it exists as anything more than an overwhelmingly strong illusion. So I would probably count myself as either a hard determinist or an indeterminist. I'd be in the middle there. I'm agnostic about the determinism aspect. So we have to look at a few other concepts. First of all, we have to really define randomness. The way mathematically you can define a sequence of numbers as being random is if you take a large enough sample. It's using decimal for the sake of argument. You're going to find 10% of the digits are zeros, 10% are ones, 10% are twos, 10% of threes, etc. This is if you're looking at a very, very large sample. There's obviously going to be a very slight variance. But if you're looking at a billion digits and you find you've got 20% of those digits being ones, then that's not a truly random system. The other thing you have to look at is, does any number change the probability of the next number coming out? So if it always, if you have the sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. I forgot 0 in there, but that would fulfill the first criteria of it being random, an equal proportion of the numbers. However, 2 changes the probability of 3 coming out next to 100%. So that is not a random system. With a random number, if you know 5's coming out, you've still got a 10% chance of any of the digits 0 to 9 following it. Quantum mechanics, we have to really get into that, because that really does seem to, on the face of it, really put the final nail in the coffin on the whole determinism debate. But this may not necessarily be the case. Quantum mechanics appears very random when we look at it, but perhaps if we could delve a lot deeper further and view far below the atomic level, far below the subatomic level, perhaps it could start making deterministic sense again. But on the level we can see it, all we can do is we can look at quantum probability density. However, you can have quantum probability, you can have a pattern which very much resembles quantum probability density with a deterministic system. I could, for example, show the Buddha-Brot fractal and use pi as the randomization key for it. Now, pi does appear to have random digits, however, it's still deterministic. Every single time you try to work out pi, the digits are exactly the same. Now, as I've said, I am agnostic about determinism. I don't think that it's ever really going to be provable one way or the other unless we somehow develop the ability to time travel, which I think is logically impossible because you'd end up creating paradoxes if it was possible. And I'll go into more reasons on another video about why I think that time travel is impossible within our universe. But what I would like to go over are some of the poor arguments which I've heard against determinism. The first one being that, well, if determinism's true, then people have no accountability. Well, first off, just because even if that was a valid argument, even if it was true that in a deterministic universe there would be no such thing as there would be no such thing as accountability. That doesn't change the truth value of the statement. That's just an argument from consequence. But I do not think that that's a valid position. I don't think that that's valid anyway. The way I look at accountability, the prison system, for example, the prisons aren't there to punish people. They are there to remove dangerous people from society, and they are there to rehabilitate people. They're not there, they shouldn't be there as just a method to punish people. And we know that rehabilitation does work in many cases, and if we can keep someone who murders people off the street, then that's a good thing. If, however, you're looking at determinism from a theistic standpoint, then that's a completely different matter entirely. If God created the universe and created human beings and knew exactly what they were going to do, they knew they were going to fail and sin, but he designed them that way, then he is accountable for the actions of that person. So within a theistic standpoint, then it does make no sense for God to create someone knowing exactly what they're going to do because he designed it that way and then punish them for what they did. The other argument is, well, if everything's predetermined, why bother? Well, just because even if everything is predetermined, I don't see why that really makes any difference. Well, like I said, there's a strong difference between determinism and fatalism. I know that if I stop eating, I'm going to starve to death. It may be there may be deterministic things in play which prevent me from starving myself, but I know that is going to happen because of the laws of causality, which determinism kind of agrees with. Let's see. The other argument I've heard is that there's dangerous ideologies which can arrive because of determinism. Now, I'd say that there's dangerous ideologies which could arrive because determinism could be misrepresented, just as evolution is true, but there's dangerous ideologies which misrepresent evolution, such as social Darwinism. But again, this is still just an appeal to consequence. It's another logical fallacy. Even if determinism, even if the whole scientific community thinks that determinism is probably the correct answer, we're not going to actually base policy or anything like that off of determinism until we've got a machine which can predict the future, which is impossible because of the 80. If you've got 10 to the power of 80 particles in the universe, the visible universe approximately. If you wanted to simulate all of that, you would need a computer with at least 10 to the 80 bits of data on it, which would be bigger than the universe. So it is impossible. Moore's law will run out eventually, and you would need to be able to predict the future before you could actually base anything off of determinism. So that is not a valid argument. And yeah, this generally comes from the people who believe in free will. So let's have a look at some of the ideas which come from free will. There's people who say that God gave us free will, homosexuality is a choice, people choose to be sin. There's people who deny depression and those kind of things, and so free will can cause just as many harmful ideologies. There are people who think that I've actually had arguments with people before who think that poverty isn't a factor in crime. It's just that black people choose to commit crimes and all sorts of atrocious fucking bullshit like that. So it's an argument from It's just an appeal to the consequence, and it's not a valid argument anyway. There's also, you're taking away my ability to choose. Well, if determinism might mean that you're forced to choose in a certain way, but we're not taking away your ability to choose. We just believe that that's how that's how the universe is. If that's the way the universe actually is, you still have the very strong illusion of free will, and like I said, it's not fatalism. If you do an action, there will be causal events stemming on from that. Finally, there's the argument from complexity. I've had people argue that they think that things on the atomic level happen deterministically, but inside the cell, or the body, or the human brain, it's too complex for that to take effect. Well, as I said, if the smallest subunits of any system work deterministically, then the system as a whole, by definition, must work deterministically as well. It would be a lot harder to predict, and it may even be, and probably impossible, even something as simple as throwing a dice. The number of different factors you'd have to get in there, such as which way is the dice facing up when you start, what fracture lines are there inside the dice which will cause the bounce to go off differently, same with the table, the position of the moon causing gravitational effects which may be enough to turn it over ever so slightly, the position of position and velocity of every air molecule. Even with something as simple as a dice throw, it would be very, very difficult to predict that 100%, even in a deterministic system. This argument kind of reminds me of something Integral Math was saying. He talked about a mathematician who didn't believe in the infinity concept. This mathematician thought there'd be a point where there is a final number, and Integral Math simply said, well, if you can show me that number, then I'll show you why you're wrong by simply adding 1 to it. It is on the onus of the person saying that the infinity concept isn't valid to show where the final number is. In the same way, I think that this is true with the determinism argument. If someone thinks that determinism is accurate at the smallest scale, then they'd have to point to where determinism then breaks down at the larger scale. What size system does it take for determinism to break down? It seems logically impossible to me. If at the smallest scale everything works deterministically and there's only one way it can go, then on the larger scale, no matter how big the system is, that system would also then have to still be deterministic. So let's also look at the Mandelbrot fractal, which I'm going to throw up a quick clip here. Now, this is known as the most complex shape in mathematics by some mathematicians, yet it is 100% deterministic. It's formed by using a colour to represent the iteration number at which the formula z equals z squared plus c exceeds the value of 2 on the complex plane. So z equals z squared plus c, very, very simple formula, creates a system which is infinitely complex, yet 100% deterministic. So hopefully I've gone over a few things which may be causing some confusion. Also, something I'd like to mention about the brain. I think this is quite interesting. I think that the quantum mechanics do have an effect on the brain. The neurons are so small that just a few quantum events, which do appear to be random at the scale we can see them, whether they are truly random or whether they are actually determined, again, it's a different matter. But the quantum mechanics will, I think, would be enough to determine whether a neuron fires or doesn't fire, and that could well cause a chain reaction which leads us to making a different decision. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.